to give you a few updates from the department. I know that most of you are here and want to hear from Alan and some of the unwinding and waiver work we're doing. We also brought Clay so he could talk a little bit about some of the retention payments and the budget process, if anyone has any questions around that. And we will wait. We'll just do a quick presentation and we'll be sure and leave plenty of time at the end to ask questions. So I thought I'd start by first, thanking Gary and thanking all of you who have taken time out of your really busy schedules to testify and support the budget as it's introduced. We're really excited about the budget. Governor DeWine has certainly supported people receiving services, people with disabilities, and our providers with the historic investment that he has made into our system. We have really focused on DSP wages in this budget, and it's been really exciting to see all of you come together and support the same thing. So I want to thank all of you for that. Also in our budget, we have funding to continue and increase both technology and multi-system youth work. I can talk about that during questions if you have specific questions about it. But again, excited to support that work that's already started to continue into the future. There's a couple other things in the budget right now that we're excited about. We're excited for the compensation the composition language. I'm all about compensation right now. Composition language. So we have some language in the budget that would require county boards of developmental disabilities to ensure at least one person receiving services sits on their board. We think that that's really important for your voice to be heard on their boards. Some counties have already taken on this and have somebody, but there are many that haven't. So we have somebody in our office, Nathan Turner, who is going to lead that project and ensure that both appointing authorities, county boards, and people who agree to serve in those roles have the training and assistance they need to be successful. So we're really happy about that. And then another thing I wanted to mention are universal changing stations. And there's a couple moms outside that have some information on that you can learn from. But we're really excited to have been able to support both of those efforts that advocates, families have brought to us and asked us to support into this budget. And so we're happy that those are in there and certainly expect to see that move forward. Just a few staff updates from our department. We're excited Lindsay Nash has agreed to be assistant director for our department. She took on that role about a month ago and has already been a huge help. So some of you might hear from her or get to see her. And then she was in our compliance unit. So Lisa Burt, who I think many of you probably know, has agreed to take that position. And we're really excited for her and for all of you to get to work with Lisa more. Tina Evans, who led our multi-system youth efforts, left us unfortunately and went to Ocala. But Matt Davlinka has stepped into that role and hasn't missed a beat. So we're happy about that transition as well. And then lastly, Debbie Hoffine retired after 35 years in the field. So we're excited for her to move on to having fun in her retirement years. And Alan Showalter has agreed to come to the department. You've been here, 3 weeks, 2 weeks? 4 already. So he can tell you about himself, but he worked for the department for a little while and then left and worked at the Ohio Department of Medicaid. So we're really excited that he agreed to come back and support us in this role. So those are the updates I wanted to give you. I'm going to let these gentlemen talk and about the things that you really wanted to hear about, but we'll be here and we'll absolutely have time for questions.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Director, and thank you all for welcoming us today. I'm Alan Showalter, and I have been back with the department now for 4 weeks. I previously served as legal counsel to the department, and then served as both legal counsel and the Director of Program Integrity at Department of Medicaid. And I'm very excited to be back with DODD. And in jumping in, head first, I'm not entirely sure, both to the XK unwinding work and some of our waiver redesign work. I know many of you are, would like to hear about the Appendix K unwinding work. So Appendix K were flexibilities that CMS allowed Ohio and other states during the public health emergency. And with the public health emergency coming to an end in May, our allowed flexibilities will also come to an end 6 months later in November. And so Ohio has been working with the Department of Medicaid, DODD, and Aging, and working together to review all the flexibilities and think about what we might want to continue moving forward, what we might want to change moving forward, and waiver amendments to hopefully be effective in November as well. We had a webinar last week that I hope some of you were able to attend with ODM and Aging to talk about some of these flexibilities and some of these changes, and received a lot of helpful questions there. We have another one. We had not too many questions. We had a lot of questions, and so we're scheduling another webinar that is tentatively scheduled for April 12th. That DOD will send out additional notices for to allow others to attend and hopefully some questions to get answered. I can talk through some of the highlights from those webinars today. The first topic was that we're interested in the continuing care provided by a legally responsible family member. And we do plan to continue that flexibility. We're still working out the final form and requirements for that, but that is something that we plan to continue in November. We are planning to allow relatives with legal decision-making authority to continue to provide homemade or personal care, waiver nursing, participant-directed homemade or personal care. There are some proposed parameters that we're thinking through with the Department of Medicaid. The care must be necessary to meet health and welfare needs. There will be a hardship criteria like a family member is unable to work due to needing to provide the care. Each individual will be allowed only to provide 40 hours of care, and parents of minor children will be allowed only to provide extraordinary care. There are still a lot of things that we're working out with ODM to operationalize this and to make sure that these requirements align with the flexibilities that DODD itself allowed before the public health emergency as well. So we've gotten a lot of helpful questions and suggestions, and we're still working through that with ODM. We're also working to think about how to replace the homemade or personal care, which is allowed on the same day as shared living. Because we've been told that the federal government, CMS, will not allow that to continue after the public health emergency ends. However, we know that families, shared living providers need assistance, so we're working at DOD to think about a respite service and what changes we can make to that in November as well, looking at the service description, where it is provided, rates, and how we can allow respite to be provided on the same day as shared living after November, to allow shared living providers some assistance as well. And we think that that is something that can meet CMS ability. The other thing we're thinking about that we'd be happy to hear thoughts on are deemed providers. And so during the public health emergency, we've allowed providers who are enrolled with Aging or Medicaid to become providers with DODD, and vice versa, DODD providers to be able to become Aging providers, Medicaid providers, without going through all of our certification requirements and failing at the other state agency certification requirements. That was not our health emergency process, and we truthfully did not use it much, but it seems like a useful and helpful tool. So we're thinking about how we could use that going forward and how we could possibly do it better to ensure that the providers that we enroll are providers we trust to provide care to the individuals we serve, but also that we don't make people jump through necessary hoops to provide services across the waiver. So we're thinking about how we can do that better as well. If you're unable to attend last week's presentation, or you're unable to attend the presentation later in April, ODM will put those slides out on its website, and we are also welcoming feedback on these topics at DOT's waiver mailbox as well. So please, whether it's at the webinar or through the mailboxes, we would be happy to hear from you on your thoughts on any of these possibilities. The other thing that we will start engaging with families on soon is the waiver redesign work that we are starting with Deloitte. So we recently contracted with Deloitte, a national consulting firm, to assist DOD in a waiver modernization project, looking at our waivers on a variety of topics, from assessments to provider reimbursement, and specifically looking at shared living and technology support services, how we can improve those services as well. Planning a lot of stakeholder outreach. We want to hear from families served on all of these topics, and we're going to hear from you hopefully in a variety of ways: interviews, focus groups, surveys, other ways I haven't mentioned here, email boxes. And so that we are working with Deloitte to finalize kind of our stakeholder engagement plan to make sure that we are reaching out to you on all those different topics, and you can start to hear from the department soon, asking for your input on those topics as well. Feedback is critical really to both of those projects. So please, whether it's here or in another format, please feel free to ask questions, reach out to us. Let's not meet anything.
Yes, it's like me in here. He talks a lot louder.
Okay. Well, the timing on that was really poor because that was the only thing I was going to say. But now play's coming up, so you might need to turn it down.
I can't do the computer from working.
Sorry about that.
I was going to say you might want to turn that down for me. I don't see that. All right, well, how's everybody doing?
Yeah.
You guys are very responsive. Usually when I do these things, no one says anything. So I'm Clay Widener, as Gary, the director, said. I work for the department. My responsibility is obviously budget, finance, lots of things with dollar signs. I was doing the math here. This is my 11th budget. As you can see, they're every 2 years. So it must be the 11th time I'm allowed in public in 22 years. So, they keep a tight leash on me, so that's why, anytime you see me in a tie, you'll see why soon. That's exactly right. So, thank you. So, I know the Budget Coalition is maybe talking after me, so I won't talk too much about the budget. Of course, I'll give you the highlights. The director kind of already set it up already. And of course, with anything, we can ask or answer any questions afterwards, because I can go on as much weeks as you like, but most of you really would not want that, I'm sure. So first of all, if you're not aware, our website does have a place for all our budget materials. If you haven't seen that, if you go out to our webpage, I think it's in the About Us section, is that right? It has all the updates, documents, all that stuff. So if you haven't seen that will be up to date as we go through the process. And as we go through the process, if you've never really been, involved or in the weeds of one, obviously the budget is currently in the House as they review the governor's proposed budget. The subcommittees and the finance committee are obviously reviewing that. They're going to have hearings today and up until, I would probably guess, mid-April. And then ultimately move a budget of some sort that will likely have some sort of changes. Whether it affects us or not, obviously will be determined. To go to the Senate, who will do the same thing. And then ultimately, once that's done, usually the House and Senate don't agree, and then have what's called a conference committee where they decide what the final version will be, and then that's ultimately what's signed, hopefully by July 1st. So that's kind of a nutshell the process. As you guys probably know, it goes fast. And, you know, the hearings, as the director said, are an important part of that. So our budget, I'll just mainly highlight, as the director said, with the compensation on our mind, right? That's obviously what our budget, for the most part, is about. And I know there's some materials out there. The governor's proposed budget does increase or propose a rate increase for most residential services to $16 an hour, an average of $16 an hour. And as I'm sure many of you in this room know, that is just what our reimbursement rate reimburses for, right? It's not a wage floor or something like that. It is an average. You know, in terms of history, as you guys might have heard when the director testified, if you were able to watch her testimony, which she did a great job, as you know, we've gone from $11.12 to $16 since 2020. Okay. From 2007 to 2020, we went from $10.39 to $11.12. So you can do the math there, and you can see why some of the issues we're trying to work on today is bridging that gap. So we made huge progress since 2020. Obviously, from the testimony people have said, that we talked about, the significant growth that we've done in the past 4 years is quite large. But that's what our budget is mainly focused on. As the director said, there's some things for technology, there's some things for local system youth in there as well, but the lion's share of the funding in our budget is solely for rate increases and rate growth, okay? And that's really all I'll keep that at the high level budget. I can answer any questions afterwards, or as long as you would go, or as long as you need. And of course, and this does come up a time or two, the rate increases do apply to both provider types, independent agency. There's no difference in that. I know sometimes we get asked that quite a bit. So they're for all provider types and that stuff. And then the only other thing I'm going to talk about is the retention payments. If you guys are familiar with that, what's going on, it is part of what Alan talked about in the unwinding. How many are familiar with the retention payment program and stuff? Oh, well, perfect, great, almost everybody, good. Okay, so as Alan talked about, and as I think maybe Gary or somebody said at the beginning, talking about the Appendix K, what's that mean? Well, that is part of the unwinding process. So those retention payments are under a temporary authority under Appendix K, which is a fancy regulatory, term for basically, when the public health emergency ends, which, unless something changes, will be May 11th, according to President Biden. We have 6 months after that to finish all the unwinding Alan talked about. And these retention payments are part of that. Okay? So, when Appendix K expires, which would be 6 months after May 11th, the retention payment would expire as well, without additional action. Okay? So, as we sit today, the last retention payment that would be made would be the ones in October of this year. And at least to the providers. For independents, it would be in October. Agencies, we'd pay the agencies, and they would probably pay staff November-ish would be my guess. But as we sit today, that would be in. I know our county boards continue to discuss kind of the plan for the future. Those retention payments were locally funded. The state did not participate in the funding. So our board stepped up and we're covering the cost of that. And I know they're, might be part of their conversation, I don't know, but they're continuing to talk about what that looks like for the future, okay? But just for being out there, and it is part of the unwinding process. And, just from our retention payment stats, we had huge success with this. We had, obviously, independent providers were paid automatically. We had 83% of our agencies opt in for all 3 quarters, but that covered 96% of the claims. So, although 83% isn't 100%, we virtually captured all the claims for those 3 quarters, which is quite impressive. I wouldn't have, to be honest, I wouldn't have guessed 90%. And I will say there was plenty of people at the department that emailed, called, and our boards did it as well to make sure providers were aware that this was going on. So I think those percentages were because of some of that work that many in this room did and people that weren't in this room did as well. But huge success. Let's see, the next one will go out in April, very soon. The reporting that the agencies are required to provide is due April 15th. So we should be able to see some of that data coming in relatively soon. And I think that's all I had. I think we're open to questions. Yeah? I'm going to back away because I'm down for me. Yeah.
All right, so we got a couple runners with mics, so let it get to you and we'll get the questions. We'll get
I just got a question on the retention bonus. The schedule that we had the first 2 quarters, so are you saying that it'll be paid for the 3rd quarter of this year as well?
So, are you talking the last one that would end? Is that what your question is?
There was like a
Grid.
grid, and it
Yep.
said January, February, March, April, May, June, and
Yep.
then it ended. So are you saying it'll be July, August, September paid as well?
So I think the grid on the website only reflected to the end of this fiscal year. Okay, right, okay. So I know what you're talking about. So on that grid, you're gonna have, and I'm sure it'll be updated, it may already be updated, I don't remember, but on the grid, what you'd see, the one in November would be for July, August, September. That quarter hours worked for July, August, September would be the last payment that is made, which would occur in October, exactly.
That's great, but that helps us when we're trying to recruit and things like that.
Absolutely,
That
yeah.
information, do you think that'll be pushed out?
I'm sorry.
Do you think will it be pushed, like, published somewhere for?
Yeah. If it hasn't been updated, I'm pretty sure the plan is to update that grid. I think really what we're waiting on is to make sure that the PHE officially ends. I know everyone has said it's going to happen, but until we actually see the words, right, we want to make sure that we can reflect what's accurately happening. And one question which isn't directly tied to what you were asking, but I think this is where a lot of the questions we've been getting recently is, it isn't retroactive to like calendar year 23, okay? So the hours worked will be July, August, September, get paid in November. We can't then go in January and go back to capture the October, November, December hours worked, okay? I just want to make that clear. It's once Appendix K expires, without any further action, it's dead on that date. We no longer can do it. So we can't go back and capture last quarter. And I know that isn't, you didn't ask that question, but that is one of the questions we've been asked. Is it in based, whenever the Appendix K expires, or can you go back and capture the whole calendar year? And we cannot. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I have 2 questions that kind of correlate. Until last week, the debate about HPC on the same day as OSL, the debate has been how many hours, not whether it could be done or not. How come all of a sudden, boom, we can't do it? It's not going to be approved.
Okay, feel free to yell at me if I'm not loud enough. So I'm not sure what the debate had been much in the past, but I do know we've learned from CMS and the federal government that they wouldn't allow it after November because they see HPC and shared living as the same service, and so it would be a duplicate payment for the same service on the same day. And so in response to that, what the department is doing is looking at allowing respite on the same day, which is a different service, and how we can adjust our service and payments for that to allow the shared living providers to have some relief without the HPC continuing.
Okay, the definition of respite is outside the home by an agency provider or by an ICF. How is that going to translate?
We're looking at changes to, I think, potentially all of those items
Because
to
I'm an OSL provider. I have no respite. When I had to have respite, Danny was my respite provider, and she had to be an HPC provider to provide care while I was in the hospital having surgery. So we don't have respite. So that's where I'm so totally confused.
And so we're looking at changes to the respite service that would allow you to have respite.
Okay.
I'm not sure I can get into the details of it yet because we're still discussing how it's going to work, but we are planning to adjust respite so that you would be able to have respite after November.
And it can be a non-agency person. That's a big thing. I need non-agency people in my house. I don't want agency people in my house.
Okay. We will.
I mean, it's nothing personal. It's just easier for me to say, hey, Danny, can you watch my son for a couple hours? Whereas if I do an agency, I have to actually have plans in place, and I'm a spur of the moment person. I'm a random person.
Yes.
So, yeah, so the way I explain things is, I majored in elementary education, so I think elementary ed. So I think of respite care as it's giving me a break.
Right.
So the way it's currently written is that break is outside the home. What we're hoping happens, and we're going to work with the department on this, is how do we give you a break from Eric in your own home? You might be up in the bedroom, and Eric's down on the first floor. But how do we give you a break? And how do we pay that break person the same that they would have been paid as an HBC provider? So remember in our training before, we talked about that list of things is a list of billing codes. I personally sit at many of the tables saying, I want to drive a truck through these billing codes, and I want to make sure that we do what's best for the person and their family. So that's my explanation, that it's giving you a break. We just got to figure out how to define it and how to pay for it.
Yeah, and I would say our goal is to provide you the same sort of service and flexibility you had during the pandemic, just using a different service because we can't continue with the HPC.
Was that both your questions, Becky?
Yeah.
Hello. So building upon that question here, if you are a family provider, like parent or, why do you have to necessarily go to shared living? Can we not continue with HPC like we used to have before, but then we were automatically switched to shared living? That kind of loses some of the options we have. HPC on the same day, we can do couple of hours and then find some other provider who can do other jobs outside the home. But now we are restricted to only shared living. And why is that, and can that be changed?
So our rules do require to switch to shared living. And we are looking at, through our waiver redesign project, whether we can make adjustments to our shared living service to improve it for both families and the individuals served. I don't expect that we won't be able to make those changes by November, but we are also looking at the shared living service. So if you have thoughts or suggestions on how to improve that, we would be happy to hear those as well. We're also looking at how families who need additional support while we look at shared living can receive that, and that's through the respite service, at least in November.
Thank you.
You made a statement a few minutes ago that said,
Hang on,
They can get your mic.
we get a mic.
You have to have a microphone.
I thought I was talking loud enough.
Nothing.
You are, you definitely,
I thought I was loud
I just want to
enough.
make sure everyone hears the.
You had made a statement a few minutes ago in reference to HPC and Ohio Shared Living performing services on the same day, which is not allowed because they consider it providing the same kinds of services. If that's true, why are they treated so differently then? Why is Ohio Shared Living treated so differently than HBC? We're forced into Ohio Shared Living. That's a parent penalty. I just don't understand that.
Thank you. Yeah, we've heard a lot from families about shared living and the hardship that comes along with that. And I think that's one of the reasons why, I know that's one of the reasons why if you look at some of the work that we're embarking on with Deloitte, our contractor, shared living and remote supports or remote technology are the two services that have been called out that we're really going to take a intensive look at. You know, when I visited all the counties last year, that was certainly one of the things that I heard the most about, and it's certainly one of the services that we want to really look at and see what kind of changes we can make.
First of all, thanks for being here today. We really appreciate the ability to ask questions because I think this is really critical. So here's my laundry list. I took notes right before this. So is there any hope that people that are already providing care underneath Appendix K, specifically parents of minor children, could be grandfathered in?
I'm not sure about that. I think, you know, that's certainly something we can add to our list to ask about.
So I just want to clarify that I do expect that parents, so I'm not sure that there will be like a formal grandfathering, but I do expect that parents of minor children will be able to continue providing care in some form after November.
But part of that, so I watched a couple of the webinars, and part of that is the word extraordinary.
Yep.
And so, as you know, the parents that I serve and the families that I serve, that key word is, what does that mean? Will there, you know, if my county board decides that we don't meet that level, will there be an appeals process? Like, there's lots of angst around this, which is understandable, and especially a lot of parents that lost their job that didn't go back to the workforce because they're already providing the care. So we need some more info.
No, I understand, and we're working very hard to get that information for you. I think, you know, the questions around extraordinary care are good ones that we're working with Medicaid to better define, but I do expect that, that parents who are now providing care will often meet that definition of extraordinary care.
And then there was a question about requirements of having to look for a provider. Will that be, you know, and I know that we're getting off in the weeds and really specific questions, but these are the things that kind of came back to me. So what would that look like? Would that be on the parent? Would that be on the SAS? You know, parents want that empowerment, and will there be a check sheet?
So those are the things that we're still trying to work out. But no, I appreciate the questions because those are, those are the concerns that we want to make sure we're addressing, and the Medicaid wants to make sure they're addressing.
My very last question. See, I told you I had one.
It's only 3, that's all right.
The payments, the retention payments, will those go 100% back to the employee, or will it be still the 5% and 18% can come off the top to the agencies?
So in terms of any difference from the way it currently works to what it's going to do until the end, is that what you're asking? Yeah, nothing will change. So yeah, the program as is what's in Appendix K. So April, July, October will all look the same, exactly the same as they just did previously. Sure, thank you.
Hello, I'm here. I just wanted to ask a question about what is the plan for opening up the scope for hiring individuals to work through an agency or private provider. I know there's a lot of restrictions. You have to have a GED or a high school diploma and things like that. But I feel that if that was lifted or something was lifted in that aspect, that it will open up the pool for individuals to get help. I know I work for an agency, so I know a lot of different people have applied or things like that. They have a clear background, everything that they need to do. The one thing that's holding them back is a GED or a high school diploma. When COVID happened, we dealt with a lot of people who didn't want to work, or they had individuals at home they had to care for. So when we needed help, we couldn't hire anybody because the pool was so short. What is the plan to do that? I mean, does it really make a huge difference if they have a high school diploma or a GED, especially if they're in their 40s and 50s, or no, they were in a family situation where they couldn't finish school? Does that mean that they cannot work in our community or help out in our community because of something like that?
Thanks. Yeah, right now, I've waived the rule around the age and the GED requirement. So currently, you can hire someone without a GED or who is 16 or 17 years old for an agency provider. That flexibility is in place until September, and we'll review it then and make the decision if we want to make it permanent or do another year extension or not. So really our goal is to look at, is it beneficial? Are people using it? We looked last September at the data and we didn't see a lot. So hopefully this September, if it's helping out agencies, we'll see that and we'll look at what we need to do to extend that. And I guess I'll also say, if there are other things that you all think like that could be waived or would help you in the hiring of folks, please let us know. I truly mean this when I say we're open to ideas. Sometimes some of the things that are in place because of regulations that we as a state have to follow, and I'm not able to change that. But if we are, we're certainly open to looking at that with you.
I don't know if a lot of companies know that they can hire. When I looked for it, it was varied. It was, we had to research it to even find it. So maybe it was put out there for a lot of in a better light, because I literally had to dig to find it. I didn't know. The only reason I did is because I needed to hire someone. And then we had to find it. But also my question is, if our agency utilize that, do I have to then get rid of the person?
No. Anybody that you hire under this flexibility would be grandfathered in and they can work for you.
Even past that.
Absolutely.
So is there a way, or do you think of a way to put it out there for agencies to know? Because I know there's a lot of agencies that are struggling to hire an individual who they need HBC services. The agency wouldn't take them unless they brought a staff member with them. That's,
So that might be some of the age. So there are restrictions around the age requirement. The 16 and 17-year-olds, can't do some personal care. And I don't have the rule in front of me, so I don't remember. But the GED, there's no restrictions, and we can certainly communicate about that again.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Sorry. Try to look at the person.
Hi, I'm Kim Musgrave. I'm a parent, and I had a question. I am excited to hear that you're looking at addressing the HPC and shared living being billed on the same day. Thank you for that. And so you're looking at respite as a service, you were saying. My question is, so say I am getting ready to hire an HPC, should I tell her to check box the respite? Because I'm a shared living provider, so thinking ahead, she's going to be getting ready to be, certified. Should I make sure she checks that box of being a respite provider?
I don't think that would be a bad idea. And we can certainly talk with the department about how to make that transition easier. If they're already HPC providers, what can we do to help them become respite providers if they're not? We'll make sure that we write that down as something to think about and see what we can do. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. I've heard a lot of parents say that they were forced to switch over to shared living. I just want to clarify, if a client is living at home with their parents, I'm an HPC provider, and the parents are not providers, is that going to affect a client who's living at home still with their parents who's utilizing an HPC provider? They have their own job, they're not billing for their child, and they're utilizing me as an HPC provider? Are they going to be forced to switch into shared living? Or is that only affecting parents who are providers?
Sorry, I don't see, oh, here, I'm sorry. I'm looking. I don't think it'll affect you. Yeah. So you could also reach out to our waiver technical assistance team to talk through any of those questions. Nayoka and Joellen are sitting behind you and help manage that, but they can also help address any of those questions.
Okay, so most of the things that were said, those are directed towards parents who are HPC providers who are switching over to shared living. Okay.
And only if the parent is providing more than 20% of whatever is authorized. So the way I explain it all the time is, if your son or daughter is authorized for 100 hours a week, remember I'm an elementary ed special ed educator. So if your son or daughter is authorized for 100 hours a week, and he lives with you, and you're an HPC provider, regardless of whether you're a family member or not, if you live with your provider and your HPC provider provides more than 20%, so if my son lives with me and I provide 21 of the 100 hours, I automatically become shared living. If I provide 19 hours of the 100, I'm HPC. Does that make sense? It's called the 20% rule. Okay? That's only if the person I support lives with me. If my HPC provider lives somewhere else, even if it's in the duplex next door, and we don't function as one home, shared living doesn't come into play.
I think the other thing to point out is when we talk about shared living, that service is only available for adults on the IO waiver. So if you have a level 1 or self waiver, that's not even a discussion point currently. So.
And then let me also just remind you or tell you for the first time, if you haven't heard, on our website, you can go on and there's a map and you can find your county, and if you click on that, then you can see people at the department who are on our technical assistance and training teams who are there to support you with your more individualized questions. So, like Alan said, Nayoka and Jillian are here today, but and if you can't find that map, we can certainly help you find that to see who you can contact at the department to walk through any situation that you'd like to hear more about or walk through.
Good morning, everybody. I'm with Arcadia Home Care and Staffing, and one thing that we do is we do caregiver matching, and we do a lot of recruiting. So our expertise is trying to fit the right caregiver with the right person. So we have that expertise, and you have the population that we want to serve. So what we have done with some of the DODB facilities that we do serve, we find that caregiver, and we want to make sure that that caregiver is long-term for that person. I know that people frown on agency because they look at us like, oh my gosh, they're coming in blowing through like the wind. That is not our intention. We are in the business to keep people at home and happy and safe. So we want to do that match and keep it as a permanent fix. Have you ever thought about even having the initiative like we do in our Montgomery County? We partner with our facility to find that caregiver and make that match and keep it there. Have you ever thought about embarking on a initiative like that with agencies so that we can partner and do what you're good at? It looks like it's not the best effect right now on the hiring situation, and healthcare is not as attractive as it used to be. So people are going more towards an agency than just sticking in the healthcare field. What initiatives are being put in place to draw that crowd to the pool of workers? Because we have them. We submit to all the conditions of participation, the UIs, the CPR, I am actually an instructor of all those things, so we meet all those conditions of participation. It's just hard to get in that realm of hooking those people up. So how do you partner and, make that happen and not look so negative as an agency?
Sure. So first I'll say, I think there's a place for all of our provider types. I think it's really important that we have, all the way from an ICF provider, agency provider, independent, shared living, and everything in between. So I'll start with that. I don't know that we have any specific initiatives, but I think it would be really interesting to talk offline and see what that might look like.
Yeah, we do a really good job.
That's great to hear.
That's very good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would also encourage all of you to come share your story and talk about the needs. So your advocacy work is very important. You're going to hear from a panel here in a couple minutes talk about all the advocacy work that's going on right now in the budget to get wages increased. And we do have to stop that fighting between independents and agencies. But I also think it's important that people receiving services have a choice in who provides that care to them. Okay, so keep up the advocacy work. There's testimony going on. I think there was some earlier today. I think there's some next week. You can write letters, get involved in OhioDDCrisis.com. Share your story. We need your support.
I have more of a comment than a question. With everything going on, our agency had to get really creative with how we were providing services. And one of the things we encouraged our families to do was consider ADS services to kind of counteract HPC services and some respite. Not all ADS services you have to attend Monday through Friday. There are some programs that will allow individuals to just come for a day or two. I was seeing some service requests for HPC where the individual just mostly wanted to get out into the community. Well, guess what? That's what ADS provides, So, they could utilize that in place of that. And again, just respite as well as a creative way to have that opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been, the last several years have really been looking at our ADS services and how can we be more flexible and allow more opportunities and a different way of funding some of those things. So I appreciate that.
Can we get two more?
Hi, I'm Amy. I work for the Arc of Ohio, but I'm also the parent of a young adult with autism on the self-waiver. Specifically, I did have a little bit of difficulty hearing the speaker about the waiver modernization. And I guess what I'd like to know and what I'd like to see is where are the parents involved in developing that process? Because I have a whole group of very educated parents ready and willing to be part and to give some really great feedback about how we can change the waiver system to be more effective and to be, quite frankly, like more equitable and accessible. Because we feel like the waivers are not that, especially the self-waiver for our children at this time. So if we could talk and find a way, I don't know if a work group is going to be established, but parents want to be part, and it's integral that parents are a part of that process, and individuals.
Thanks, Amy. We are, that is one of our biggest priorities at the department, is to hear from family members and people who receive services in this process of redesign. So, well, that's one of the things that we've been working a lot with Deloitte on, is what is the engagement process going to look like. So we have come up, I think, with a variety of ways to engage families, and we'll be rolling that out over the next several weeks. And please, if you don't see an opportunity that you think families are going to be fully engaged, let us know. There will be an email mailbox that's, I was gonna say generic, and that's the wrong word. It's very, it will go straight to Deloitte and Alan's team. And so, make sure that you let them know, that you don't think there's an opportunity or you think there is an opportunity. But we've done things like small groups, emails, surveys, there's all kinds of, there's a variety of ways for people to be involved, because we know that many of you are working full-time and have, taking care of your loved one, and it's hard to be engaged in long-term work groups. So that's not something that we are looking at really for any stakeholder. We really want to get feedback and then give you things to react to.
So the ARC's also part of those stakeholder groups, so we will be involved in that, so just so you know. Yeah.
And we want that.
Good morning. First and foremost, I want to say thank you all for coming to work. I always tell my parents the same thing. I have a couple of questions, and I may be ahead of the gun, just because I've attended some of your seminars in the past. So my questions are, as an independent provider, sometimes some of my challenges become more challenging. Number one, when I don't have parent involvement for a rollout of activities or things to do. So I encourage that from the parents to stay involved as well. The second thing is that some of my clients I've had to release because they were too much for me alone. And this has become apparent, like people with wheelchairs, when the parents have Hoyer lists or they don't have Hoyer lists, and their expectations are greater than that of themselves. And it becomes challenging for me as a one staffer to come out and lift that person or to care for that person on my own. So I guess my question would be, in the future, if that would be a consideration, to be able to provide staffing for people who really need that 2-on-1, to be able to pay both of them at the same time when that's really a necessity, to be able to care for that person. The second thing is that I have a client who was at an impasse. She's an older lady and she was moving. And it became apparent to me that there are no resources for someone like her when she has no money to be able to move. I had to use my personal vehicle to help her to be able to move. And that should never be, because it's a liability for me and it's a liability for her. But I find myself, again, as an advocate, making sure that it happens. So I was a little disappointed. I even called Governor DeWine's office, who never got back with me, to find out where I could find resources for people that had that same situation, because I'm sure there are. The other thing I wanted to address was, and this is way ahead, I know, about the GTI services, which I'm sure you'll get into. But I find that to be more of a challenge and a hindrance than an absolute help for people. And the reason being is that the payments are whenever. I mean, people don't get paid. They find the most ridiculous reasons to deny payments. I had a client who was receiving GTI services for a gym membership. Every other month they found a reason not to pay them. And it was just a simple thing of that they didn't sign a piece of paper, even though they went through this for a whole month. And it's absurd to know that there are just so many challenges that parents have to overcome to give help for their kiddos and to be able to get the services that you work so hard to put in place. I also have a couple of openings for myself that I've had challenges in fulfilling because parents want me to come out for 2-hour-long seminars, and that just ties up my time and theirs, which I'm not being paid for, and then only to have repeat conversations until we finally start moving forward. So just a couple of challenges that I myself can speak about as an independent provider for a long time that I'm running into right now too.
Thanks for sharing those with us. For the first part of your questions, I would say, encourage you to ensure that you're working with the County Board of Developmental Disabilities and their service and support administrators. They're the ones who can, look at the ISP and the needs when it comes to how many staff are needed at one time and those sorts of things. So that would be my advice to start with. And then if you need additional support, please reach out to us and let us know. And we know that in some situations that's not able to happen, and we are trying to figure out internally how we can best meet those needs. Again, it gets into Medicaid or Medicare not allowing for the same service to be billed on the same, so all of that plays into it. But we're looking into how we can support folks that we know need that extra care. And then as far as GT independence, I'll be honest, we have heard some complaints about them, and we are working to schedule some meetings with them and see how we can support them, maybe in a different way or what needs to happen. So I appreciate that.
Yes, my name is Mark Evans. I'm from Lebanon. I'm Director of Open Auctions. We have 6 homes. My question is on non-medical transportation. Is there going to be any increase in that, because there's no transportation out there that wants to drive some clients to their jobs because they're not making any money and they're losing money. And I just had a girl that worked at the movies cinema for, 15 years. Well, we've tried to find her transportation there. Person does it once or twice, the traffic says it's not worth her hassle, it's too far, so she had to quit. I just don't think there's any, we're a nonprofit, okay? It's not about the money, but when it comes to, I don't have wheelchair accessible lanes. She has a scooter, so therefore I have to auction go out somewhere. There's nothing there. Transportation is just went downhill in Warren County. At least on my part, that's what I think.
Yeah, thank you. I can speak to at least what's in the governor's proposed budget. All transportation services under DODD waivers would be increased by 10% under the budget that's currently out there right now. Obviously, I can't speak for if you guys use other aging or My Care and the other service systems. I don't know exactly what their rate increases are, but under ours, non-medical transportation, all HPC transportation, self-directed transportation would be 10% increase.
And one more question. You guys were talking about staffing, as in younger kids, which I wouldn't hire anyways, but as far as I know, to take any CPR, your delegated nursing, all that, you have to have a diploma. That's just facts. You don't do it that county. They give some of it, and if you don't have your training, some of this training, which you need a diploma for, you're not going to be able to take this class. And quite frankly, it's hard to find staff. I'm understaffed, and the amount I'm receiving from my clients to bill for is not covering the bills. My payroll is outrageous, and it's that way all in Warren County, and providers are giving up homes. It's a mess. It really is. We're barely breaking even. And like I said, we're not a profit. But I gotta have money to pay the electric. And so that's all I got to say.
Yeah, we know that with medication dispensing and some of that sort of thing, that you have to meet other requirements.
Right. So if they work there, then I have to pay somebody else to go in there.
That's right.
And when you go from paying $15 an hour and you got
got so much overtime, it's $22.50. You're losing.
That's right. That's why many
Director, I gotta look at that.
Right. That's why many agencies have decided to not utilize the waivers, because I think it depends on who they're working with. Thanks.
I wanted to find out when Appendix K first started.
2020.
Well, yeah, I mean, which iteration of Appendix K are you talking about? Yeah, so they started the pandemic. We've had a few different versions because they've been different things that we've done throughout the pandemic. Appendix K is always related to some sort of emergency authority. So we started pretty much, I mean, without knowing exactly the date, March of 2020, in that ballpark would be the first one. Retention payments didn't go in until the end of last calendar year, so it really depends on which kind of, regulation or change in Appendix K you're referring to.
The HPC, because the only way I found out about it was through Becky's Facebook page, and along with her and Gary was able to last October. However, my daughter was home from her day program all through the pandemic, and I had her 24/7 and had been asking SSA through DODD for help, and there was nothing I could do. I had her no matter what. And I mean, I've never had any until Appendix K. I've been 24/7. I work holidays, vacations. That's just the way it is. And then I had to fight for it. And so even though it started in August, I found out that she actually had like $10,000 in her budget. They were still like, well, maybe 5 hours here, maybe 5 hours there, because they don't pay for it. They didn't even want to give me that. And we were trying to work on a flip in a house, so I couldn't take her with me, and I couldn't leave. So how can we get that information a little more timely? Because I missed out on a lot of time being able to have some help and so that I could go to work.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly when we added that into the Appendix K. I don't believe it was in the initial version. But hopefully as we unwind and make services more concrete for counties, it'll be easier to get those kinds of things approved.
Maybe they could send stuff in the mail, because sometimes DODE doesn't want to tell you the things that you're asking for, or...
Yeah, so I don't know if everybody's on all of our mailing lists, but if you go to our website, you can sign up we have Memo Mondays, we have Director's Corners, we have things called Pipeline, and all of this information we do put in those communications, but I know sometimes, folks aren't signed up for those things.
Right. Also, some of it's not always understandable.
Sure. But yeah, if you have any question, again, please call us, and we're happy to walk through any of those things with you.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Hi, I'm Patrick Over. I'm Director of Programs at Stepping Stones down in Cincinnati, Ohio. Wanted to talk largely about adult day services. We do provide adult day programs, and we've had people talking about wages. We ideally would love to be able to hire people with college degrees. Unfortunately, we are striking out time and time again at any college fair, at any career fair, in large part because the wage isn't a college graduate's wage. It just doesn't, it doesn't appeal to them. It's not interesting to them. There's no way that we can provide a pay scale that provides annual increases in their rates and everything like that. So we're really struggling to find where is that demographic or that pool of individuals that can work for our programs and work consistently. It's even a struggle for us to hire kids that are currently in college because they can't commit to a consistent schedule. And for us, if we're going to bring additional adults into our programs, it doesn't help us if someone can commit to this semester or commit to next semester. So for us, we're really kind of bound by the fact that we don't have the ability to offer wages that interest someone who's going to stay for a year or two. When we've got people that enter our adult program, they're here for 20, 30 years. So how do we, maintain a consistent staff that allow them to be able to continue to stay in our program without those dramatic changes or being forced to turn away people? And kind of related to that, our issue right now, and I think a lot of adult day service agencies are that we struggle and actually cannot provide any services for acuity C individuals right now. We don't have the staff to do that. We've had plenty of people ask us, hey, you know, we've got a staff member, an independent provider, someone that provides HPC services, they could come with them. You know, and we've had plenty of tours of individuals that they would thrive at our programs, be able to go out in the community, but they need someone who can provide that quasi one-to-one support that we just don't have. And we're told that, well, we can't have them have a staff member come in because that's a duplication of services. You know, and our struggle is that at our adult program, we're coordinating the program, we're providing community outreach, we're doing all of these things. They just need someone that can maybe provide behavior support, but what we're being told is that those are two identical services that are being provided. So, you know, we're always interested in unique and new ways to offer, you know, the ability for people who, I think I saw on one of the sheets here, are on our invisible waiting list. You know, we've got more and more people that are saying, hey, the folks with the most, significant developmental disabilities, we don't have anything for them to get out of their house and do. And large part of that is because the rules limit our ability to, one, hire staff, but then two, limit our ability to be flexible in allowing them to do something that makes sense for them, just so they can join our program and participate in it.
Yeah, thank you. I would really encourage you to reach out to Keith Banner in our department. We, again, have been working on this kind of proposal for the last couple of years. We call it our blueprint proposal. And we have lots of incentives built into that program to do exactly what you're talking about. We have and I can't rattle off, but some floater staff who could act in that one-on-one capacity, higher rates for people who have more complex needs, those sorts of things. So I hear you. The workforce challenge is a challenge for everyone, not just our field, but everyone. So I think we're all competing for the same people, which is a struggle for everyone. So, I would encourage you to maybe reach out to Keith and look at that proposal with him. And if you have suggestions, please let us know.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And help support House Bill 33.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Amy Hurd, and I'm an independent provider since 2010. One of the things that I want to talk about is I have two individuals that live with me. And the 2-to-1, as you are billing, which I think is very unfair, because as they say, your time is split. I did have 3, but it just became overwhelming to really actually, do the work. So you're doing the same work, during the week. I give a bath every day. I don't give a half a bath. I cook dinner every day. I don't give half a dinner to the second girl. So you're doing the same laundry, you're doing the same work, so why can't you be paid? It's like taking advantage, and I know that's not DD, that's Medicaid, as they have told me, that this is how Medicaid sees it. But it's unfair because you're doing your job. And what happens, because I've talked to a couple people, what happens when that happens in a lot of work, as people look, then people start not doing. Maybe they don't give that bath every day. Because now they're trying to, say, hey, I'm not being paid for what I'm doing. So that hurts the individual. So that's some of the things that, that you should really, really think about as far as paying people. And to the lady that you were talking about moving, the county, in Hauck County, I don't know if they still have it, they had funds for individuals that did not financially able to, pay if they had to move. Then the county paid for it. They have money. They have extra money. One of the biggest problems that I see, people working together. I used to work for the Department of Children and Family. As we work together on behalf of the people that we're serving, because people are not working together. As you talk about independent provider agency, it should be all about the people that we're serving. And everyone should be working towards that goal of providing that care. So that's me for right now.
Yeah, thanks for giving that feedback. We'll take that back as well. And thank you. And you're absolutely right. That is what our mission should be.
All right, so thank you, Director Clay and Alan. Appreciate all the info. Do you have another question? I'm trying to. One more, sorry. One more, I promise.
How much you guys can get a hold of me when
Yeah,
I'm here?
they're gonna stick around for a few minutes too. So we want to talk to them on the side, but we have a panel coming up soon to talk about the DSP crisis and wages stuff.
This is just one quick question. I have an independent provider and agency provider, but and the independent provider got retention payments. It was great how it went through automatically. But the agency provider did not get hers, and no one in the agency did because of some, I'm not really sure what the details were. Maybe they didn't register in time or whatever. Is there anything they can do to get the retention payment? No.
Yeah, thank you. So, we have been working through some of those issues. So obviously there are strict requirements in the rule about who is eligible and what is an eligible DSP, quote unquote. So if there's a case where a worker believes they are eligible, there is a spot on our website, and like I said, we've responded to thousands of emails, and I'm not even exaggerating, thousands of emails related to this, that they can reach out to us and we can investigate it. So agency providers had to have payments in process by March the 15th, and which in theory, if they waited to the last possible minute and you give them 2 weeks, most DSPs should have something by the end of this month, which obviously is Friday, right? So, and then their reports have to be in by April 15th. So I would say anyone that works for an agency that believes they are eligible, reach out to the retention team, get inbox. We are logging those, we are following up, we're verifying that they understand their eligibility, and if they believe they are eligible, we are then following up with the respective agencies to see what's going on. Yeah, and the director said, which is an important part, thank you, but it was up to the agency to opt into the program. So yeah, thank you, that is a very critical piece. And we did the best that we could, as I said, to tell everybody under the sun about this program numerous times for months. But if the agency did not opt in, they never received the money and there's nothing to pay out. So that would be also another thing as well. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Are you coming up here, Gary?
Yeah, I just want to thank the panel. I had more than several parents come up to me and said, this would never have happened before. And we thank you so much just for honesty, and not that anyone wasn't before, but you were direct. Yeah, I'm sorry. I brought my own.
We can hear you.
Yes. I tell people I bought a crown the other day. I was accused of being a drama queen. I have absolutely accept that honor. Amazon sells tiaras. I've got a really nice one. David doesn't allow me to bring it to meetings anymore, but
you guys don't know my pain.
So thank you.
All right, so up next. Okay, so up next we have the panel that will be talking about the DSP wage crisis. That will be Debbie Jenkins, Policy Director for the Ohio Healthcare Association, Peter Moore from the Ohio Provider Resource Association, and Gary Thomas, the CEO, President for the Arkansas.
There is a hearing of the House Finance Committee going on right now. So Adam Herman, who is the Executive Director of the Ohio Association of County Boards of DDs, may come in. He texted me, and he may be coming in. We share a board member with the County Board Association, and he just got finished testifying. So what we want to do in this session is talk about what you all know. There is a crisis going on. The governor has recommended an increase in DSP wages by 16.5%. That's historic. Imagine your employer, if you worked in the real world, which I call, gave you a 16.5% increase. We believe we need a 50% increase.
Yes, we do.
This would apply to homemaker personal care providers, shared living providers, day service providers, intermediate care facility providers. So these two are giving you the data. When I testify, I have to tell you, Debbie sits on one side of me, Pete sits on the other side. Those of you who know me, my job is to tell your story. Some of you saw me, telling your story gets me a bit emotional. So I'm sitting between this big guy and this lady. Pete hands me a Kleenex, and Debbie grabbed my arm because your stories are compelling. Your stories are compelling. It's that convinces the state legislature to give us the funding we need. And it's really difficult, Dave and I will go into it later this afternoon, but it's difficult to comprehend sometimes where the money comes from, where the laws come from, where the rules come from, and who has to approve it all. So what we're going to talk about in this session is where the money comes from and what we need to get you all a 50% raise. If we get this 50% raise, it would go into effect on January 1st because the legislative process to approve the budget began last month. It will go until June 30th. The governor then has the opportunity to sign it, and then it will take from July 1st until December 31st to write the rules on how we're going to spend the money that we got in the first half of the year. So that's why when we are successful, that it won't be effective till January 1st of 2024. Okay? So I'll let you guys just take it from there. You don't want to be telling them stories.
You can use that one or the Marcos, whatever you want.
Okay. I like to move around,
Yeah,
so
okay.
I'm not a stand or sit still or stand up at a podium kind of person. So my name is Debbie Jenkins. I'm from the Ohio Healthcare Association. Thanks for having us here today. We have been, doing this and working towards this budget for probably a year and a half already. And as Gary said, we're not planning to be done with the budget until June. We hope that we will have a budget done and signed by July 1st. That's the timeline when we're supposed to. But this is a long process. I mean, we knew pretty much right after the pandemic started, we worked on a lot of things. You guys talked about Appendix K, some of the flexibilities and changes when the pandemic hit. Then, within a year after the pandemic, the staffing crisis got tremendously worse. And we knew we had to do something, and we knew that we saw a lot of things going on in Ohio, but we also saw a lot of things going on across the country. And, Pete and I both, we participate on some national organizations, and we really saw, there were other states that were out there, and they were doing these rate increases pretty quickly. Most of it had to do with the timing of when their budgets were. Other states are on different cycles. Not everybody runs on the same cycle as Ohio. But in Ohio, we pretty much were stuck with, we got these one-time funds, right? So the federal government gave the state some money. The county boards kicked in some money. We got these one-time funds, but you can't hire people, and a person can't decide to do a job because they may or may not get a bonus once or twice a year, right? That doesn't work. Even if in the end of it, it increases their total wages by, $2 to $5 an hour, somebody can't live that way, right? You can't decide where you're gonna live. You can't decide to pay your food bill, right? And pay for your groceries based on a maybe this might come, right? So unfortunately, Ohio has pretty much stuck with that one-time funds. We've done it a couple times. It's helped. It definitely has helped. I mean, I think many of our DSPs are very appreciative of the funds that they were able to get, and it helped them get through some of these, changes we're seeing in our economy, right? You go to the grocery store, you can't get, I think I paid $4.99 for a dozen of eggs at the grocery store, right? Before, I used to get them at Aldi for 69 cents a dozen. I'm like, what happened here? Why are things costing so much more? And then they try to say that inflation is only, 5-8%, right? We know that the things that impact people in their daily lives have raised a lot more than that. So the one-time funds have definitely helped, but we need to have something that's going to be consistent. And it's what we found then over the last year, as we've been working towards this, it's really more about getting people to come into our field, right? The hiring of folks, getting people to be interested in our field, whether that's going to be as an independent provider or working for an agency. I've talked to several of our members, which most of our members are agencies, but we talked to a couple of our members and they've said, hey, we're doing kind of a better job with the retention piece of it, getting people to stay, and some of these bonuses have really helped with getting people to stay. But where I used to have 50 applications for my jobs, I now have 5, right? And then I think I've got 10 people hired for an orientation class, and 2 people show up the first day. And then, by the second week of orientation, I only got 1 person left, right? That's what we're seeing. And the reason we're seeing is that because, everyone else out there is paying more money. You guys know it, you see it. I live in Pickerington, which is a suburb here of Columbus, and really close, there's a ton of warehouses out in Etna. And they're paying, we got Amazon, we've got all these warehouses that are out there paying $20 an hour for people to start, $22 an hour to start. And they don't require a high school diploma, they don't have the background checks, they don't require people to submit to, hey, I'm responsible for this person's life. And if I forget to do something, I might get an MUI, which means that I can never work in this field again, right? They don't have those requirements. And so, getting people to come work in this field and to do this job, it's a hard job. How many of you are providers? How many of you provide care? You all know, right? How challenging, what it requires, what the skills are needed. We know that we're trying really hard to sell the message to legislature right now that our workers deserve a pay based on what they do and the work you do, and we need to value that. So that is the message I think we've all been sharing with the legislature over the last several weeks. We know some of you have come in, shared your stories. Gary talked about stories, right? Everybody has these stories, and unfortunately, there are more of them than we have the time to share. And that's just sad, right? I mean, it shouldn't get to that point where we're having to tell these stories about people having to quit their jobs so that their loved one has someone to care for them. The stories that we're hearing. I have a provider of ours who didn't have staff for a home, so they had to give notice to that home. Well, that home, those people that lived there, they couldn't find providers and staff. And within 6 months, 3 people were in the hospital. Those are the kind of things that we shouldn't have to face, in our society. And those are the stories that we're trying to sell. Tell them to the folks that are making the decisions. Now, I'll be realistic here, right? We've all said, Gary said, we're asking for a 50% increase. We think that kind of direct support average wage should be somewhere around $20 an hour. I mean, we'd like it to be higher, because remember, that's not a starting wage. That's not like, you're brand new, you're coming in, I'm gonna hire you, and I'm gonna pay you $20 an hour. That means Okay, if I have a whole bunch of people who are employed at an agency, I may have new people coming in that might get 16 bucks an hour, but I might have somebody who's worked here for 25 years. I need to make sure that I can pay her or him what they're worth because they've been working there for that long. I know somebody around here talked about, keeping staff and the need to be able to give pay raises every year. Any other job, any other industry, any other career that you go into, there is an automatic expectation that over time, as you learn, as you get experience, as you prove your value, that you get a cost of living increase, right? That you get a raise. And that hasn't been in our Medicaid rates. It just hasn't been a function in there. One of the things that we have in the amendment that we're trying to get into there is to have some type of automatic annual increase tied to inflation. So as you guys know, if you get Social Security, you get a cost of living adjustment every year. We'd like our Medicaid rates to do the same thing. We know that's a hard sell because it's really hard for a current legislature to commit funding in the future. But it's the right thing to do. So we are really trying hard to advocate for that, and we do hope that that will be something that they will include in the final version of the budget. I think Clay talked a little bit earlier about the process. So process-wise right now, we're working with the House. The House Finance Committee had subcommittees, and there was a subcommittee on Health and Human Services. That's the one that's been meeting since the end of February through March. They wrapped up last week. Today started the full Finance Committee, so that's going to have a lot more members of the House on there. And so there are folks, Gary said today, we got a lot of folks that are over there testifying today. I think we as a panel will be testifying next week. We will continue to share the message. Then what will happen is there will be amendments to the current bill. So we talked about what's in the current bill. Clay told you guys it's a 16.5% increase for the residential type services and a 10% increase for the adult day, transportation, employment type services. So we believe that all services need to have an increase. So regardless of where a person chooses to receive their services or what services they're choosing to use, we think that all of our staff deserve to be paid a good wage, and so we're looking at on the waiver side a 50% increase on all of those types of services. There are ICF services. Anyone in here has a loved one or somebody who lives in an ICF? Okay, a couple of you, good. So ICF reimbursement is done a little bit differently than the waiver services. I think most of what we talked about today has been waiver services. But the ICFs, they do a cost report, so they submit how much it costs to provide all the services. And so in that, basically what they do is they take the prior year's costs and they use that to set the rate for that facility for the next year. That doesn't really give a whole lot of room to be able to give raises because you're getting paid based on your historical costs. So we're asking for an add-on. The governor's budget did create an add-on to the direct care costs, which is basically your staffing costs, in the amount of 6.5%. And so we're asking for that to be increased to 40%. That 40% will get us basically to around the $20 an hour average wage that we are asking for on the waiver side. So regardless of whether you choose for your loved one to receive services in an ICF, in a group home, under the waiver, at home, in your home, regardless of where it is, we believe that all of our staff need to receive a good living wage. And we think $20 an hour will get us there, at least today. We know that who knows what inflation's going to do over the next 2 years, right? So we may have to keep doing this fight every year, trying to make sure we can get this, but at least today, we think that the $20 an hour average wage will get us there. We've got a long way to go. And let's just be honest, it's a lot of money. It's a really big number. And that's where the challenge comes in, right? So when we're dealing with the legislature, they get projections on how much revenue the state's going to bring in from taxes and other sources, right? The state of Ohio basically pays about 1/3 of the total cost. The federal government pays about 2/3 of the cost. But that 1/3 is still a very large number. And so we've got to be able to try to work with folks and figure out how we can get those. And know that we're not the only people asking for money, right? So, you got, in the budget, you got just within the Health and Human Services field on Medicaid, right? You've got all these other Medicaid services that are asking for funds. You've got, education, you've got transportation, you've got all these other places and people who are looking for funding. So we've got to go in there and make the best case we can and hope that the projections on revenue are high enough that they can cover some of these asks that we have. And even if we have to chip away a little bit at a time, we've got a good start and a great foundation through the governor. If we can get the House to give us a little bit more, and if we can get the Senate to give us a little bit more, every dime we can get, I think is helpful. And I think our staff and the people receiving services will appreciate that. But what we know we have to do is we have to get at that wage that will allow us to compete with the other markets. And we've seen that. We've had a couple providers who have large foundations and funding, nonprofits, that have been able to do that and use some of their reserves to increase wages. And we know that if we can get to starting wages of around $17 to $18 an hour, average wages around that $20 an hour, we think in most areas of the state that's going to be able to get us to get more people in. Is it going to get us to the total number of people we need to serve all the people who are waiting and all the people who are on a wait list for a waiver? Probably not, but it'll be definitely better than where we're at today, and hopefully we can keep serving the people we're serving today. Because right now, as you guys have probably seen, there's a lot of providers who have been giving notice to the people that they serve and saying we just can't serve them anymore. And we need to stop that. At some point, we have to be able to stop that and then start building back up our services. So that's our goal. That's what we're here to do. That's what, Pete, Gary, Dave, I, and others are fighting for every single day on you guys' behalf. So, yes.
So I saw, thank you. So I saw a lot of looks on the independent provider faces when we said, we keep saying $20 an hour. So you want to explain how the rate is?
Yeah. Let me give you a little bit more detail, and Clay probably could give even more than that. But when we're saying an average wage of $20 an hour, when we're talking on the waiver side, we're talking about the wage component only. So even in the independent provider model, there is a wage component to that. That's what we're looking at getting up to 20. And then it builds in, employee-related expenses, which would be your taxes and, the workers' comp and things like that, right? And then benefits, and then your unproductive time. So, you can bill only while you're providing the service, but we know you can't bill while you have to do certain tasks that are related to that. So I don't have the exact number.
25.
25? Okay. So Clay says for independents that would work out to $25 reimbursement based on a $20 an hour average wage of when you're providing the service.
So
that's $16. That's what's in the budget.
Oh, sorry. Take that back. That was on $16 an hour.
Right. So we just want you to know we've not forgotten you. Legislators are going to have a difficult time understanding independents. And if we went out and said our independents are getting $21 and $22 an hour, but we want $20 an hour, that would be confusing. So we want a 50% rate increase to get to an average of $20 an hour, and that's our message. But for you, it's that base rate then of 20 plus more for what you would theoretically, I know many of you are families, so you don't pay all the taxes, but you build the taxes on top of that, your training and all that other stuff. So your rate would be going up by a percentage.
Yes.
You would end up with $20 an hour.
Yeah, just like today, the average wage, whether it's an agency provider or an independent provider, the average DSP wage component of the model is the same. What you get as payment is different because of those other components. You have training, you gotta have all these other things you have to do. So when we're doing it, it would still increase on the independent provider rate. It would still increase. So Clay said if we get it to the $16, which it is today, that would equal out to $25 an hour as your average reimbursement rate.
Yeah, and Ohio shared living is included in this.
And Ohio shared living, it would be the same, like a percentage. So whatever the percentage is, that would be the increase.
Right.
At least that's what we're asking for. 50% increase on what it is today to a 50% increase.
So $54 a day increase.
I don't know. Oh, yeah.
So what I neglected to say, and I'll say it now, for those of you who are agency representatives, I know we've got CEOs in the room, these are the two primary trade associations that represent providers. They sit in partnership with the ARC and the county boards and two other trade associations where we're working together in partnership. We do disagree occasionally, but we have a tight bond that when we walk in the doors of that state house, when we meet with our legislators this afternoon, we all speak with the same voice.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Terry has a really good point there, because if you've watched, you may have watched our testimony 2 weeks ago. We get asked by legislators all the time, and this is just typical, right? Are there any regulatory things we can do, things that we can make it easier for you? And we know that there are. We know there are a lot of things in our system that we could fix and make better. The problem is we have learned over the years, and I don't even know what budget this is for me, a long time, but legislators often want to know those things because it's easier for them to say, I'll do that for you, but I won't give you any money, right? And so what we're really trying to do is when we say, we want to be singularly focused on raising the reimbursement, because we know that even though there are other things that would help people to stay in our field longer and that we could do better, we all know we can do better. But the number one thing that is stopping us from getting people to come into our field or to stay in our field is the compensation that they're getting. And so we try to stay away from, during this budget, we're trying to stay away from some of those other things that we can do, and we'll work with the department, we'll work with you guys, and we'll work on those other things outside of the budget, but we want those legislature folks to know, whether it's in the House or the Senate, it's really important that compensation is the number one thing that we can do to impact how we provide services in our system.
Great, thank you, Debbie.
Trying to not fall off the stage. I gotta be careful. It's pretty scary up here. I'm Pete from Facebook. It's great to be here. It's great to see all of you, and you could just feel, this is my second art conference, and coming in the room, you can just feel the passion, right? So I appreciate that very much. And Debbie did a great job of outlining where we're at with our advocacy. We have a saying at Opera, ABA and ABE. ABA and ABE. Always be advocating, always be educating. So one of the things we've been doing for the past couple of years, this budget process is like no other. Usually we gear up around mid-fall for the budget, which we're in right now. We've been working on this since the day after the last budget's been signed. And just to give you some perspective, the last budget that was passed by the legislature and the governor gave our system a 4% increase. 4%, which is, we are appreciative of, and we must show our appreciation, but it just wasn't enough. This pandemic has put our workforce issues on the fast track, probably by 10 years. Easily 10 years. Last couple years ago, we were thinking $15 would be really good. It's no good anymore. It's no good anymore. That's why we're looking at the average wage of 20. But we have to educate legislators about our system. I'm sorry that the director left, but I want to give her some praise. Her folks are still back. They'll tell her. But she has done an excellent job, along with the governor, of making the case for increases in our system. We are happy to have a starting point of an average of $16 an hour across the board. But it's just not enough. It gives us the opportunity, a springboard with the state legislature to go for more. And as I left testimony to come over here, sorry to do this, legislators, when you have legislators in a committee telling the panelists who are testifying, we think we should do more, we're off to a really good start. A really good start. So our education, along with our advocacy, is paying off. You should, and I hope you will, get involved in this effort. One of the things that we've done in this effort, different from others, is usually it's just the associations that will get up and testify about the issues facing our field. This time, we have providers partnering with families, partnering with people receiving services, and telling the story. That is what's working. Legislators need to hear the stories. They connect with the stories because there's a super long line across the street of people going in that building and asking for money. But you guys have unique stories. David mentioned Ohio's ddcrisis.com. You have the opportunity to go ohioddcrisis.com and tell your story. And we're taking those stories and we're using those stories across the street. That, my friends, is what makes the difference. That is what's going to move the needle, and already is. But there's more work to be done. We will not rest until that budget's signed. Then I may take a day off. Then we'll start on the next one, and the next one, and the next one. We are behind. The governor in his address, in the State of the State address, talked about a moral imperative that all children should be educated in Ohio. We're making the argument, and I just heard, I got a text from my colleague at the State House that Representative Sweeney just said the DSP crisis is a moral imperative in Ohio. The advocacy is working. It is working. And if we get you involved and we get your friends and family involved, it will be bigger than we ever expected, right? So I'm here to encourage you to build relationships with your legislators. Educate yourself about who they are, where they're from, and what they care about, and get them to care about you. I have a saying I've used for a long time, and this is important when you're building relationships with legislators. You never start a great relationship with, "You suck, be my friend." You start with cookies, you start with kind words, you start with ask for support. So as you're building those relationships, it's just like any other relationships. They start slow, they start by getting to know each other, and they grow over time. That's how you start. And I know we're all fired up, and we need money now. Yeah. Need it now!
Yesterday.
Don't start there. Don't start there. I'm telling you, it won't work. Don't say, "I will die if you don't give me this increase." Wait 2 weeks till you roll that out, okay? So I'm here just to encourage you to be involved. I'm happy we'll all stick around and answer questions on what that looks like. I know Dave and Gary and his team do an excellent job of informing you how to get involved, but it's never too late. And if you're not getting involved in this budget, you get involved and build that relationship for the next budget, okay? Because we're going to need ongoing support to address this moral imperative. Ohio also has an infrastructure problem. We are all excited about new business coming to Ohio. New business means more taxpayers, more revenue for Ohio. But if we don't have the infrastructure to support that family who wants to work for Intel or Amazon or the Kohl's warehouse, and they have a child with a developmental disability, and we don't have the services to provide them, why would you want to come to Ohio? Why show up? So we have to work on this infrastructure, and this is a part of our message as well. So, Gary, David, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
You need to know that in the coalition, we have a county board representative, we have the trade associations. Dave and I are there representing people with disabilities and their families. We know that many of our families have been forced into providing services. As our residential programs close, as our residential and day services can't find staff, we met with the governor a few months ago to start this out. And he pointedly said, where do these people go? Well, they go back home. They go back home.
We got to clean this. We're not getting
I know.
I just want to add, if I could, just the importance of advocating. Pete, Debbie, Gary always talk about it. It is really critical because we can get up there and we do a good job and we do our best to tell your story and testify, but your story has so much more impact. So please share your story, whether that's in written testimony, coming and testifying in front of a subcommittee. It's really important.
And literally, we will hold your hand.
Yes, we will help you through it.
We have done that. If you stand at that podium, Dave or I promise to hold your hand. Let's do questions. Yeah, we'll get a whole box of tissues.
Here we go, get some lights rolling.
So, questions on...
I think you've been wanting to ask a question for a long time. I waited till you had food in your mouth.
So we've got a number up here.
Okay, well, I got it.
Okay.
Oh, you waiting for me?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, my question was about the independent wage increase. I know we're focused on the actual support portion of the rate, but I was wondering, if there's any work in progress to increase the administrative portion of our wage, because since the implementation of ADV, I know that my billing has gone, the time to do that has doubled, and dealing with GT, and then before that Morning Sun, hours and hours and hours of just correcting their paperwork and trying to get my taxes right for my employee shift. I'm not really an employee, I don't have any benefits as such, but I have all the work involved. So yeah, just wondering, because as far as I know, we haven't had any significant increase to that portion of our rate since all of that has been added on to our workload.
So a couple things. Any increase in the wage component, everything is like a factor of that wage component, so it will give you some increase in those non-wage reimbursement parts. So you will get some of that no matter what the wage increase is. However, Alan was up here earlier and he talked about that waiver redesign effort. And we believe, whether it's the independent model or the agency model, there is a lot of things that people have to do that they can't bill for. And we think that we need to look at those factors and probably change and adjust those. So what I would suggest is part of that, Director Hauck talked about doing a stakeholder engagement, and whether they're going to do different things, focus groups, surveys, things like that. Make sure you're saying that message too. Because we can bring the messages and say that, but we need a lot of people, because if you think about it, think about the time you spend, just for required trainings, right? Just to keep your certification, you have required trainings. The time you spend with the SSAs to do planning, the time you're spending to do billing, EVV, oh my goodness, let's not even go there with EVV. They haven't even started matching EVV to your claims yet. And so when they do that, that's going to be even more time because you're going to make sure you have to correct all that. So the kind of what we consider the non-billable time, that has really increased with a lot of these regulations. And so those are things I think we could probably make good arguments during the waiver redesign. The problem is going to be, usually we get some people from the department still here, but the problem is going to be, this is what we're doing, timing-wise, things only work on certain times. So we've got, this budget where we're trying to really get those increases to address the wages and the compensation. The timing of when that waiver redesign work is going to happen is kind of after that, so that's really like the next budget. And so we'll have to figure out, sometimes when we do that work, people go into it with, oh, the money we have now is all the money we have, and so if we're going to put more money here, then we have to take it from somewhere else, and that doesn't really work, right? So we really got to figure out what we need, and then see if we can potentially get that into the next budget to ask for those increases to be able to fund those extra things that you're talking about.
So my panic is that I service an extremely rural county, and I can almost never ever punch in at my individual's home. It is 30 to 40 miles away before I actually have cell phone service to punch that in, and oftentimes we're like in our services, and so maybe I don't get, so I'm constant.
You're doing the manual.
Yeah, every single service I provide is a corrected claim. I can never just punch in, punch out, and bill accordingly, and so yeah, my workload to get that, and like you said, I'm not even getting denials for it yet, but when that begins to happen, I mean, it would almost get me out of the business, to be quite honest, because I'm not even making money anymore once you factor in all the at-home hours I have, just to make sure that EDB matches SAM data, matches EMBS, and then it's just a nightmare.
Well, let's just be honest. I did a lot of training on EBB around the state, and I worked with a lot of independent providers that don't really even know how to use a computer. I mean, to be a provider and to provide care, it's completely different than being a business person and knowing how to do some of those administrative tests. So, I mean, honestly, we worked really hard to try to fight against it, but it's a federal regulation. And so what we can only do now is try to see if there are ways where we can narrow the scope of it or advocate at the federal level. And we do that. I mean, periodically we go to DC and we talk to the folks there. But at this point, they don't really have anybody that's moving forward with something to revoke EBB at this point.
Well, it's one thing to have to do it, it's another to have to do it and feel like you're not getting paid for it. Because again, my business model, my pay rate is the same as it was before I had to do it.
Right, and that's what we get with a lot of these regulations. What we see is you've got people who create regulations because they see a problem and they want to be able to address that problem. So EBB was because they want to make sure people weren't actually there delivering the care. That was the whole point, right? But the problem is they do these regulations but they don't ever adjust reimbursement for the additional expense. And they feel like they often say it's a cost of doing business. Well, yeah, the cost needs to be covered somewhere, right? I mean, we can't just not get paid for doing work. No one goes to their job, and that would actually be illegal if somebody went to another job, right? Say I went to work at Kroger, and I was there and they didn't pay me. That would be illegal for them to not pay me. So we have to try to make sure we're doing the same thing.
It also blurs the line to require certain things of us and then not
reimburse for it.
We're essentially being asked.
Hi, my name is Ina. I applaud you guys for going in and advocating for us. I testified for the John Peterson Scholarship. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever done in my life. And I've done a lot of weird things. But I think we need to hear that you need us, because we feel like, we feel a lot of times that they've got it. We don't need to. But I was shocked yesterday because I'm preparing to come here and I see John Cross, who is our representative, actually posted about the crisis.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, he mentioned something other than Indian Lake watershed.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing they've ever brought up. Like, between our federal and state, it's always Indian Lake or whatever. And I know that infrastructure is a big deal because we have friends that live across the country, and we actually had one woman that lives in Chicago. They came to Ohio. They checked out multiple locations. They were going to move their family. Their son has complex medical needs and IDD, and they will not come to Ohio because the infrastructure is not adequate for what they have, which shocks me because I don't think Illinois has that great of infrastructure. But they felt like Ohio was too lacking. So I applaud that you brought that up, and that's very important. And I bring that up all the time to our school district where we live, because we're a very rural school district. And our school district literally will not focus on special education services. Like, as we refer to it, they're constantly passing the buck between the county and the state, or the rural. So thank you guys for advocating for us.
So let's take one more, and we're going to be here. So come to us and ask questions individually. You've heard me say this before. I believe we represent conception and resurrection and everything in between. And if you think you're one of ours, you probably are. But we as families don't. This moment we meet someone in Target, we don't say, "Hi, my name's Gary and I have a child with a disability." We've got to train ourselves to say that. And we also have to train, I love Mark. Mark describes his daughter as, it's not about disability, it's not about Noonan syndrome. My daughter has curly hair. So you have to add that first before the label. But damn it, if we need help, we've got to say we need help. We do. We have to say it. We've got to teach ourselves to say it. Everything we get today is based on us first saying we need help. And if we don't say we need help, we don't get help. So let's do one, and then we are going to be here during lunch.
Hello everyone, my name is Vera, and I'm from Trumbull County. I'm a parent and very new to OSL. I've been doing some advocacy work all on my own, lots of letter writing, lots of surveys going out. I never hear anything back. What's my next step?
So, question. Where are you calling, emailing, letter writing, who to like DODD or to your representative or senator?
Elected officials and any survey that I see online.
So I would suggest calling their district office. So that is usually you're going to get somebody, a staff person or somebody. And let me just say this. Talking to a staff person is a good thing. I think a lot of times people think if I don't get a one-on-one FaceTime with my elected official, that it's not going to make a difference. But that's not true because most of the people who do the work for the elected official are their staff. And so if you can get a hold, and their staff are usually more responsive. So if you can get a hold of their staff, call them, talk to them, ask, I'd like to set an appointment. I'd like 15 minutes, right? See if I can come talk to the staff person first. And then as you're talking to the staff person, then say, hey, I'd really like to meet with my elected official. Can you get me a time on the calendar over the next month, right? Sometimes you have to be flexible. It's really hard, especially when they're in session. Most of them are here, if you're not here in Central Ohio, so most of them are here Tuesday through Thursday. Sometimes they're, here longer than that. But a lot of times they're back in their districts on, different days. We were just a month ago went to a legislative breakfast in Cuyahoga County on a Friday, right? And so being flexible, asking them, if you are a provider and you have group homes or if your loved one lives in a group home, invite them to meet you out at that location in their home to sit down around their dinner table and say that. I know it's not, sometimes those are harder because that involves travel and everything, but it really can make an impact if they see, you and your story and how it is impacting your life. But sometimes those letters or emails can go unread, or they're read and it's a kind of a quick response, like thank you, appreciate it, we'll keep that in mind, versus, making sure that you ask a specific question. Like, I would like to meet with you. Can you give me a time over the next couple of months where I can meet with you?
Could I just add on that just a little bit? I think they're much more likely to read your email if they recognize your name because they've met you in person before, right? So I know it's hard to get to events and other things, but if you can get on local mailing lists for the Republican and Democrat Party and see when they're having events and you're able to go and actually have a little FaceTime, then they'll be more likely when they see your name pop up in their email to read your email.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, guys. So I just want to end with a couple of things before lunch because I get the pleasure of telling you about the box lunches out there. Strength in numbers, right? Advocate, keep up the work. I want to respond to your question a little bit about the survey. Sometimes survey data is used behind the scenes to build those stories and to advocate. So I'll just say that. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Gary.